Our top story today, US President Donald Trump has announced new details and initial funding for his Golden Dome missile shield system. Trump has embarked $25 billion for the project, which he said could eventually cost a total of around $175 billion and would be operational in about 3 years. Here's what the US President said.
Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years. Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles even if they are launched from other sides of the world and even if they are launched from space. I'm also pleased to report that the One Big Beautiful Bill will include $25 billion for the Golden Dome to help construction get underway. That's the initial sort of a down deposit. And we have probably, you're talking about, General, we're talking about $175 billion total cost of this when it's completed.
Meanwhile, China has accused Washington of undermining global stability. Beijing has denounced the Golden Dome as a threat to international security and accused the United States of fueling an arms race. Here's what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said.
本国优先，执迷于谋求自身绝对安全，违反各国安全不受减损的原则，损害全球的战略平衡与稳定。 中方对此严重关切。我们敦促美方尽早放弃发展和部署全球反导系统，以实际行动增进大国战略互信，维护全球战略稳定。
On the other hand, the Kremlin has said that Donald Trump's plan for a Golden Dome missile shield requires consultation with Russia, but was otherwise a sovereign matter for the United States, softening its tone after previously slamming the idea as destabilizing. Peskov's comments came 2 days after a call between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin that the US leader said went very well. The proposal, which Trump ordered a week after his inauguration in January, would see Washington deploy missile interceptors in space to protect against ballistic and hypersonic threats. Trump has said that the US Space Force General Michael Gutlin will lead on this and that Canada has expressed interest in being a part of it as they want to have protection also. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth, speaking alongside Trump, said the system is aimed at protecting the homeland from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones, whether they're conventional or nuclear. We're now joined by our guest today, Cliff Smith, who is the National Security and Government Affairs professional located in Washington, USA. Thank you very much, Cliff, for joining us. This is another seemingly large proposition from the US president, and it, of course, is gold. What's the idea behind this new Golden Dome? And obviously, we know that the US is very politically divided. We have seen interest from Canada in this, but how, you join us from Washington, how is the US reacting to this announcement throughout the political spectrum?
Well, I mean, the idea of missile defense is not a new one. I mean, it goes back to the 1980s, and the U.S. has developed different capabilities and shared them with their allies at different times for a very long time. This particular proposal, the Trump administration has a different method of many other administrations. It tends to go sort of with a big press release about an executive order on a topic that may or may not be, for lack of a better term, fully cooked or fully, bought into by the necessary players, and then try to get them to sort of go along after they made the announcement and sort of get what they can. It's sort of a headline first, details later method of doing things. I sort of see this as the same way. I mean, frankly, the Chinese reaction to the announcement perhaps gives credence to why it is necessary. I mean, this goes back to an old Cold War thing where the Russians would always denounce missile defense as provocative, even though it is by inherently a defensive measure, which I think goes a long ways to explaining Chinese intentions and Chinese views of the world at this particular time, which is unfortunate. Nonetheless, I would wait, I suppose, to see how these kinds of things shake out, because the kinds of things that he's talking about are things that take years, and My guess is that 3 years with at best a minimum amount of congressional buy-in at this point, and let alone bipartisan buy-in, it's going to take time for this to play out. I wouldn't take it at face value that it's going to work out just as the administration says. That said, I do think it is basically a good issue for them. I do think it is basically something that probably most national security hawks and of any stripe are going to be at least favorably disposed to at least hearing things about, and it could develop into something very real. I just wouldn't take that quite at face value right away.
Yes, and obviously the things most in contention is the speed which Donald Trump says he was going to get this done. He said it'd be done in the next 3 years. Also, the cost of an initial $25 billion. Do you think that's warranted? Do you think the US is facing enough threats to warrant a defense system like this? A world first, 400 times the size of Israel's Iron Dome.
Yeah, I mean that's the question, the $1 million question, or the perhaps multi-billion-dollar question, I suppose. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I do think that missile defense has long-term benefits to deter adversaries that are good. Whether or not that the kind of price tag he's looking at, the sort of focus he's looking at, is worth it in light of other threats from from terrorism to AI to the war in Ukraine to in Europe stability and other things that are priorities. That's a good question, and those are the kinds of questions that I feel like under a more normal administration in America, you'd already have sort of discussions about beforehand, and those are the kinds of discussions I'm not sure we've had yet. Which is why I'm saying I think we might have to wait to sort of see how this really develops in practice. But I think those are the kinds of things you're going to want to think about, and my guess is those things are going to be sort of litigated or discussed in the political sphere more specifically in the coming months, and we'll see how that plays out.
And Cliff, we have talked about China briefly, but do you think a system like this would make nuclear powers like Russia or China more aggressive or more cautious?
I'm more cautious. They can say it's going to make them more aggressive all day long. I don't think it's true. They clearly see anything that would diminish their ability to strike first as a threat, which I think again tells you something about their mindset, which I think is unfortunate. So in a sense, they do see it as a threat. At the same time, I don't think either Putin or the others in the Kremlin or those in Beijing, are at least, particularly at this time anyway, are so reckless that they would do some kind of first strike before it would come online. So barring that, which I don't think is realistic, I would think it would make them much more cautious, because the only reason you take sort of offensive action is if you think it's going to gain you something. If you think it's going to fall flat, you'll never do it. So I think it would make them more cautious.
Cliff Smith, thank you for the insight. You are staying with us. We now move on in a tense news